All right, so we did see an example of an if-then statement in an earlier video, but now I want to focus on them a little bit more intensely. Now, I'm going to say here you try this one, and in fact, I do invite you to try this just by pushing pause on the video. But take this sentence: a tiger is not happy if it bites. And what I'm asking you to try here is just to hit pause on the video and write down what you think that would turn into in terms of a standard form categorical proposition, just kind of using your own intuition about what this sentence means and what you, of course, know about standard form categorical propositions. So I'll just pause here. I'm assuming you've now hit pause and then unpaused and come up with a suggestion as to what the answer should be, okay, hopefully without, again, looking at the PowerPoint slide. So when we say a tiger is not happy if it bites, the first thing we need to recognize, of course, is that we have that word if in the middle. And when that happens, we need to make sure we move the word if and whatever follows it to the beginning of the sentence before we translate it. When we do that, when we move the word if to the beginning, we get the bit about biting to come with it. And when we say if, we're really saying all, right? When we say if, we're saying any time a tiger bites, a tiger is not happy. So we would say all tigers that bite are unhappy animals, for example. All tigers that bite are unhappy animals would be a fine translation of this. I expect that if you did try this, some of you probably came up with something with the quantifier no. And in fact, it is correct as well to say, as a standard form categorical proposition, no tigers that bite are happy animals. Right? And of course, you might recognize here that these two statements, all and no, the A and the E there, these mean the same thing, of course, and we know that from the rule of obversion, right? We talked about obversion before, and in fact, these are just obverse statements from one another. And of course, what we learn about obversion is that whenever you obvert a standard form categorical proposition, it always ends up meaning the same thing. Now, what you hopefully did avoid, this is really important, you need to avoid writing all tigers that bite are not happy animals, right? If you write this, of course, this is an example of the dreaded all are not. All tigers that bite are not happy animals has all as the quantifier and are not as the copula, and as you know, again, that's ambiguous. I want to also say, though, if you had, because this is not all the varieties that would be correct here, but sort of the main ideas, if you had instead, all tigers that bite are animals that are not happy, okay? All tigers that bite are animals that are not happy, would be correct. And you do have the quantifier all there, and you do have are not, but all tigers that bite are not, all tigers that bite are animals that are not happy moves the are not into the predicate term itself, right? So animals that are not happy is the predicate term, and so that means this are not, this instance of it would be not the copula, right? It wouldn't be working as the copula, so it would be, we could say permitted. So instead of saying unhappy animals, as we see in this first instance, you could say animals that are not happy, and that would be equally correct. Now again, if you're at all nervous about messing this up, the thing to do is just to avoid the words are not next to each other, and you could do something with un usually or non. Those are a couple good options there. All right. These markers apparently work too well, right? Okay. Now, as you saw here, unless is also listed as a type of conditional statement. And what you can recognize, of course, is that unless means if not. That's the meaning of that word. And so if I were to tell you, unless tigers are fed, they will bite, right? Now, that is a type of conditional statement. So what you want to do before you actually translate this into standard form is you want to turn unless into if not. And in this case, that would mean if a tiger is not fed, then it will bite. So I want to make this clear. Going from unless a tigers are fed, they will bite, to if a tiger is not fed, then it will bite, we have not translated the original sentence here. We've taken an intermediate step, and we need to do one more step now to turn it into a standard form categorical proposition. But you want to take this intermediate step because once you get it with the word if at the beginning, conditional statements are hopefully not too difficult to translate. You can actually follow the translation hint here in that box at the end of 3.6 and just replace the word if with all, and then everything else streams out, so to speak, the way it is. So we would end up with all tigers that are not fed are tigers that will bite. So if becomes all, and we get all tigers that are not fed are tigers that will bite. All right. So we'll move next to the words only and then the only. And so just to come up with the basic scheme here, we would say what we want to do is remember that that word only appeared on that list way back when. So make sure the word only is at the beginning of the sentence and use the word all then and switch the order of the terms. Now, as I indicate here in the parenthetical comment, there is a problem with the translation hints box on this account. And so I'll get to that after I cover both only and the only, all right? But just a little warning there. But the scheme here, the plan is when you see the word only, make sure it's at the beginning of the sentence, then turn the word only into all and switch the order of the terms. Here's what I mean. So let's say I told you that only men are playing in the NFL, right? So we've already got the word only at the beginning, so that's taken care of. And so what I have said is, okay, we're going to turn only into all. Now I've said switch the order of the terms, right? Let's say that somebody forgot or didn't really understand what I meant by that, but they did turn only into all. Of course, what they would get then would be all men are people playing in the NFL. So this is where they've turned only into all, but they haven't really switched the order of the terms. The man here is at the beginning, and it's also in the beginning here. But I hope we can quickly recognize that this would not be a correct translation, right? Because while it is true that only men are playing in the NFL, or at least true at this time of recording, and probably true for a while, it is not true that all men are people playing in the NFL, clearly, right? So if it has a different meaning, it can't be the correct translation from the first one, right? If it were true that all men are people playing in the NFL, well, I would be making a lot more money than I do currently, but at the same time, of course, I would be severely injured. So anyway, we'll just keep that in mind. So we can recognize then that the correct way to translate only is to put it to at the beginning as it was, turn it into all, but then we have to switch the order of the terms, right? So the bit about playing in the NFL comes first. The bit about being a man goes to the end. So we get all people playing in the NFL are men. That would be the correct translation, right? That captures the meaning. It's got the quantifier all, and it's got the copula R way down there next to the word men. Okay. At the same time, what if we have the phrase or the two words, the only? Well, things change here. So when you have the only involved in a sentence, again, you want to make sure the only is at the beginning of the sentence before you translate it, but don't switch the order of the terms, right? So again, we have one of these little tricky distinctions here. Only, switch the order. The only, don't switch the order. So, to give an example here. If I told you that birds are the only large animals that can fly, well, before we think about that too much, we would at least recognize, okay, we've got the only here in the middle. We're going to put it to the beginning with whatever followed it before we actually try and translate it. So we get, the only large animals that can fly are birds. All right. Once we have it in this form with the only at the beginning, and then we've also taken whatever followed it with it, now we're going to, if we're going to follow the directions, we would simply replace the only with all, and the rest of it play out the way it is. But let's say on an exam or something, we turned the only into all, but then we thought, oh, maybe I need to switch the terms. Well, then we would get this. The only becomes all, but if we switch the terms inappropriately, just to emphasize, we would end up with all birds are large animals that can fly. And once again here, I think we can, just by understanding what we're talking about, recognize that this is a mistranslation, right? Because the only large animals that can fly are birds. I don't know if it's exactly true. When I've raised this in classes in the past, people bring up, flying foxes, for example, that it's a kind of large bat, and they fly, I guess. So I don't know if it's true, but it's generally true. It's mostly true, if I could, try and sneak that in. But is it true at all that all birds are large animals that can fly? Clearly not, right? The penguins would, be the prime example here, among others. So, not true that all birds are large animals that fly. What does capture the meaning of the original is to follow our directions here. The only becomes all, and we don't switch the order of the terms. So our sentence becomes, all large animals that can fly are birds. And that captures the meaning of the original, and it's in standard form. So I really, again, recommend putting examples like these on your note sheet so you can remember, oh, the only looks like this, only works like that. And then, after having gone over all of that, I like to throw at you all, students, this sign here, parking for no anchovies only, others will be towed. And I usually show this to my students, and they sort of sit there a little bit flabbergasted, not sure how to translate this. And that's actually the intended effect. Don't worry about translating this. I will just share with you that I went into a restaurant where I lived many years ago, and actually it's still there, but anyway, this sign was hanging there where the host is, where they would seat you. And of course, since I teach logic, since I teach this section in particular, I had to take a picture of it so I could inflict it on unwitting students. Nonetheless, I will just also share with you, this is more of a more embarrassing confession, but for many years I really had no idea how this could make any sense until a student actually clued me into the context in which it actually would make sense. And so I'll just share with you, you can try and think about what that might be, but I'll just share with you that if you could imagine a strip mall somewhere, and you've got your dry cleaners, and right next to the dry cleaners, let's say, is a pizza restaurant. And of course, you want to have parking for your customers, right? For the dry cleaners and for the pizza restaurant. You want to make sure the dry cleaning customers aren't parking where the pizza restaurant customers are supposed to park. And if that pizza restaurant was called No Anchovies, this is the sign you might put in front of the parking stalls that were reserved for your customers. So that is how it would make sense, although I do have to say, not to nitpick or anything, but technically speaking, they should put the no anchovies here in quotation marks to indicate that we're not actually literally talking about anchovies and their ability to park their cars in particular spots, but, I don't know, SpongeBob World or something like that. But we're talking about the restaurant, right? No anchovies. All right, but nonetheless, don't let that bother you too much.